In this video, I'm going to solve a word problem involving multiplicative comparisons. We're comparing the amounts that Blanche, Dorothy, and Rose ate. Blanche eating half as much of the cheesecake as Dorothy, Dorothy eating 4/5 as much as Rose. Of course, when we say something like Blanche eating 1/2 as much as Dorothy does, we're really saying that the ratio of Blanche's amount to Dorothy's amount is a 1-to-2 ratio. For every one piece Blanche has, Dorothy has 2. And similarly for Dorothy and Rose, since Dorothy ate 4/5 as much as Rose did, then the ratio of Dorothy's amount to Rose's amount is a 4-to-5 ratio. For every 4 pieces Dorothy has, Rose must have 5. We're interested in what proportion or what fraction of the entire cheesecake did each of the friends have, and of course to find that out we'll need to know how many pieces the cheesecake was cut into. And we'll use these ratios to figure out what are some possible answers for how many slices there are in the cheesecake. I'll start with Rose. If Rose had 5 slices, Dorothy would have to have 4. And that's, of course, coming directly from that 4-to-5 ratio of Dorothy's amount to Rose's amount. Next, we're thinking about Dorothy and Blanche. We know that for every 1 slice Blanche has, Dorothy gets 2, or equivalently, for every 2 slices Dorothy has, Blanche has 1. If Dorothy has 4 pieces, or in other words, if Dorothy has 4 pieces and has twice as much as Blanche does, then Blanche has to have 2 pieces. And that, of course, is just using the idea of an equivalent ratio. The ratio of Blanche to Dorothy is 1-to-2, but of course that's also equivalent to the ratio of 2-to-4. For every 2 slices Blanche gets, Dorothy has 4. So I've put my 2 ratios together. If Rose has 5 slices, then Dorothy would have 4, and if Dorothy has 4, then that means Blanche has to have 2. So the total number of slices, 5 slices for Rose, 4 for Dorothy, and 2 for Blanche, 11 in total. Or in other words, we could say that Blanche has 2/11 of the cake, and that Rose and Dorothy has 4/11, and Rose has 5/11. Just a little bit of commentary on this. We started with supposing Rose had 5 slices and figured out how much Dorothy and Blanche would have to have had. We could have also supposed, for example, that maybe Rose had 10 slices, and if Rose had 10 slices, that would mean Dorothy would have to have 8, and if Dorothy had 8, then Blanche would have to have 4. Another possible number of total slices could be 4 plus 8 plus 10, or in other words, could be 22 slices in total. So the second part of the problem is the question of if the cheesecake weighs 1,000 grams, how many grams of cheesecake did each of the 3 friends eat? If we're thinking about the fractions that we know, the 2/11, the 4/11, and the 5/11, Dorothy had 4/11 of the cheesecake, which means Dorothy had 4/11 of the 1,000 grams. Or in other words, she had 4/11 times 1,000 grams, which gives us the improper fraction 4,011 grams. That's not a terribly useful answer for us to give. If somebody wanted to know how much Dorothy ate, we probably would be expecting an answer in terms of a decimal. So what you can do is on the side find out what is 4,011ths as a decimal, and you'll find that it's 363.63 repeated grams. You'll have to take a look at another one of the videos to see how I work my way from fraction to decimal, and I'll show this exact example of how I calculated the 363.63 repeated grams. For the other two friends, I'll speed my way through that a little bit because the calculations are very similar. We have Blanche's amount was 2/11ths of the cake, so she must have eaten 2/11ths of the 1,000 grams, or 2/11ths times 1,000 grams, which is 2,011ths grams. And as a decimal, that would be 181.81 repeated grams. And finally, for the last friend, we have Rose. She ate 5/11ths of the whole cheesecake, or 5/11ths of the 1,000 grams, or 5,011ths grams, which in terms of a fraction to a decimal, that would be 454.54 repeated grams. So how much of the entire cheesecake did each of the friends eat? 2/11ths for Blanche, 4/11ths for Dorothy, and 5/11ths for Rose. How much of the 1,000 grams? 363.63 repeated for Dorothy, 181.81 repeated for Blanche, 454.54 repeated for Rose.